Right, the calls for a basic income grant in South Africa have been rising given the desperate need of many. The COVID-19 Social Relief of Distress grant of 350 Rand is already in place, but that was a temporary measure. More than 10 million people are currently benefiting. Those who want a permanent basic income grant also say it should be higher to reflect poverty levels. But not everybody agrees. Professor Alex van den Heever says the recent leaking of a Presidential Economic Advisory Council arguing against basic income support raises questions about whether this is a debate about constraints or one that is ideological. He is chair in the field of Social Security Systems Administration at the Wits School of Governance and chair of the expert panel on basic income support. Professor, thank you for being with us. I don't know what you think, but I find it surprising the alignment that we've seen on a basic income grant. You have lobby groups concerned about the poor saying we need it, and then even investment houses saying there's too much risk if you don't have support for the poor. I spoke to the former CEO of Goldman Sachs. He's saying it should be 800 Rand. Do you feel then that the president's own advisors are out of step?
Well, I think that some of them are. What we've seen was an initial leak of one particular view coming out of the Advisory Council, the President's Advisory Council, and now we've seen subsequent documents which show that that there are views that are quite strongly in favor of the basic income support framework. So I think that there's certainly disagreement on the Economic Advisory Council, and I'm sort of fairly critical of the arguments that have been presented of the group that are opposed to it. And that's really where sort of a lot of my concerns lie, is that a lot of the time, many of these kinds of proposals are attacked on the basis that these sort of fiscal constraints and economic impacts that are negative. But in reality, the fundamental argument is we just don't think that this should ever happen. And I think that we do need to get the technicalities right in these debates.
You argue, in fact, that this sort of oppositional argument is an example of general thinking about the economy that has dominated in South Africa. And you say it's one of the reasons why so many people are unemployed and poor.
Well, I think that we haven't really changed the social conditions in South Africa since 1994, and that presents some real problems in analysing the outcomes of the policies that we have implemented from that period. And so there continues to be arguments pretty much along the lines of the approach that we've adopted since 94, which is really against the idea of any kind of redistributive expenditure toward lower income groups. That includes people who are low income earners as well as people who have an absence of income. But the arguments of that group have often always been in favor of substantial subsidies going toward higher income groups. And so there is a total inconsistency in the logic that's being applied. So we really do need to change our thinking. And the basic income support framework that we've analyzed as part of our expert panel was look very carefully at the technical questions and at the social implications, and essentially said that the social advantages, the social and economic advantages of a basic income support framework outweigh the potential negative impacts. And that's what we essentially have to focus on.
Could you deal with the belief or the argument that underpins a lot of opposition? The argument or the idea is that people won't work if you disincentivize work and give them other means to survive. And we do hear stories. I heard young people who came from North England saying they wanted to get out because the thing to do was to start having children young and start getting support and start claiming.
You're going to always have some people who abuse various or take advantage of some kind of income support. But all the evidence shows that is a very small minority of the overall picture. Those are anecdotal instances as opposed to systematic effects on the economy. You do not find widespread unemployment in many of the countries that have very comprehensive social protection regimes. In fact, you have very, very high productivity employment, which is one of the benefits and advantages you get out of a system which doesn't penalize you for periods of unemployment, which allows you to adjust and enter markets, enter the system in a way that favors your own life path. So when you create extreme penalties for losing income, and you in fact make it harder for people to essentially exercise agency. And that is really one of the fundamental arguments. We also, in our extensive report of the expert panel, which was sort of 6 economists and 1 social security analytical expert, we analyzed the whole issue of dependency, so-called syndromic dependency, in detail. There's an enormous amount of evidence on this, and none of it shows that you're going to have systemic negative effects from basic income support. Yeah. And certainly you might have it at very high support levels, but not at the levels of 350 Rand per person or anything up to the upper bound poverty level. You're not going to have a major effect, a disincentive effect at all.
Yeah. Professor, for viewers who'd like to read your article, I mean, you actually quantified and show that there is support for high income earners, like the tax-free savings account, retirement benefits and things like that, that may cost more than the social income grant, or certainly where it is right now. And I like the way you recognize that many people are unemployed due to factors outside of their control. I don't know what you think, but often in South Africa, I think about women with babies. They need those creches that closed down during COVID-19. We know there weren't enough, and you need to drop your child off somewhere so you can go and get a job or keep that job. And many people are just in a simply impossible situation.
Exactly. There are many instances in which people require some form of income support. You don't necessarily expect them to be working. They're in a form of natural dependency in a way, looking after, bringing up children. But there are also people who become unemployed for reasons that are beyond their control. And so usually when you try to apply a disincentive or a penalty to somebody who's behaving badly or their conduct is something that is inappropriate, you do so because that conduct can actually respond to that incentive. When something is systemic, then you can't. Then all you're doing is you're penalizing somebody who is already disadvantaged. And that's the vast majority of South Africans who are unemployed in South Africa today. So they do need to have income support to enable them to participate to some degree in society. And certainly the levels of the COVID social relief of distress grant are really only a small token toward this at this point, but they still, due to the fact that people have bothered to claim it, show that it is necessary. But somebody who's even working as a gardener or working as a domestic worker is not really that interested in 350 Rand. It's a small proportion of their income. So the fact that 350 Rand means something to 10 million people shows you how necessary it is. And it should actually be higher, and it will not create a disincentive. It creates a platform for them to actually move forward. And that is really the approach, that the understanding that should go with this kind of support framework.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing up that number. More than 10 million people in South Africa are currently relying on a mere 350 Rand just to survive. That is all they're being offered. That was Professor Alex van den Heever from the Wits School of Governance. He is chair of the expert panel on basic income support.